and it's was never really either built for purpose or well built. And so for the first 10 years of its life, it was hardly used. And when I came along in 2007-8, where Silvertown Foundation took over the management of the hall from wimpy subsidiary, really, who were just running it for commercial gain and for no real community benefit. And so we started off by focusing a lot on the youth work, because at that time Britannia Village had the highest per capita crime rate in Newham, and so we were able to address that and gradually build up a whole range of activities in the hall. But the building was never really ideal, and it's been, well, getting more and more battered. It's been well used more recently. We've set up a daycare nursery, Tiny Town. I see Tina's here, which is an outstanding daycare provision for our working parents, which is fantastic. And of course, the GP surgery is just left after 10 years, and we were able to not just to offer it, but to almost twist the NHS's arm to provide a GP surgery south of the dock. But the GP surgery has moved on. And 2 or 3 years ago, we had a survey that told us that we're going to need to invest a substantial amount of money just to maintain the hall in its current form. And alongside that, we've got a number of new community facilities that have cropped up, where Silvertown Foundation are now managing the Royal Wharf community dock across the other side of the road. And in the community, we've been very involved in setting up 2 new schools, Royal Wharf Primary and Oasis Secondary. Now, Royal Wharf Primary is just opening, and 2 weeks ago I went round to look at the multi-use games area on the roof there, a 4G pitch, which we're going to be managing on behalf of the primary school, and that's a new sports provision. But there's a big school hall there, which we're hoping to be able to hire out on the school's behalf. And the school has been designed for that sort of use, as has Oasis Academy Silvertown, which we can all see rising up on the North Woolwich Road, story by story, and that's scheduled to open well in the first part of next year. And they're going to have, again, a sports hall, multi-use games area, 3G, and other hall. And so from a business point of view, where Silvertown Foundation is facing quite a raft of new competition, potentially for hires. And so we were thinking about what was the best way forward. And a lot of the business of the hall, well, in the early days was big party hires, because the hall is a large space. But that brought a lot of people in from outside of the area and created parking issues, and also the more rowdy parties. And we addressed that early on by limiting the time on Saturday nights to 10, 11 o'clock, so that we were trying to discourage those more rowdy parties. But we've had to have a lot of churches, and some of them quite noisy on Sundays, just in order to earn income from the hall, because that's really the most appropriate use. And what we would like to do is to have a much more tailored community facility for the benefit of people in this community. And so we were looking at that and talking with the GLA, who are the freeholder, and between us we came up with the possibility, in order to replace the community space, of providing accommodation as well. And Helen will tell you a little bit more about the journey with the accommodation, but the plan that we're going to be outlining tonight is a plan that we've come to believe is the best one for the area, although we haven't got as far as any sort of designs yet, because we genuinely want this to be a consultation that shapes the development, if it happens at all. And it's something that we as a community can own, and we recognise is a far greater improvement on what we've got at the moment. So yeah, I think that's a bit of the history up to where we are now. And so I'm going to hand back to Helen for her to outline where we are with our planning.
Great, thank you, Dave. Yeah, so I guess just to say, we, as I introduced Alice earlier, we have appointed some architects for the initial stage of this design, but we have no plans or anything drawn up yet. And the main thing that the architects have been doing so far is speaking to key stakeholders, such as the schools, regular hirers at the hall, around what they would like out of a new community space. and we'll talk later on about what the next steps will be. But that's where we are at the moment. We don't have plans to show you, and we're intentionally coming to you before that point. Dan, do you want to talk us through our aspirations? I'll share my screen so that people can see the slides.
Sure, thanks very much, Ellen. That's great. I guess the starting position really is that what we want here is something that's really the best for Britannia Village. What we have now is mediocre and could be so much better. And I suppose we all know that great designs of buildings and places can be enormously inspiring. And as a building which is very much at the heart of the community, it's even more important that the hall is somewhere that everyone feels welcome, that looks and feels welcome to all parts of the community. So as we started to think about the project, some of these are the kind of themes that have come out of those conversations. But what I'd like to sort of reiterate, and what Helen just said, was that the conversation that we're going to have tonight in the next breakout will help to shape and refine some of these objectives. It might introduce some new ones, it might remove some of these, it might change some of the words and add to them. But we felt it was easier to start with a set of initial overall objectives rather than with a blank piece of paper. And then what's going to happen next is we'll then work up, we'll get a design team to start working on some options, and then talk with yourselves about those options as they emerge. So in terms of the overall sort of statement of vision, it kind of says at the top there, it's a beautiful, flexible and inclusive new centre and affordable homes at the heart of a proud community. And we've tried to boil these down to 6 main sort of themes. So first of all, about that welcoming, uplifting and flexible and long-lasting community centre, not one that is knocked down in 20 or 30 years time, but it is going to be there for the long term. Potentially to provide beautiful new homes that design and manage to best meet the needs of this area and of this community, rather than meeting the wider needs of the market or the council's housing waiting list, for example. Thirdly, to be community led at each stage of the development, and obviously long into the future as well. Fourthly, to make sure that the existing key users, which are a big part of what the foundation is about, such as the nursery, tiny town, daycare, vibrant minds, and all the other user groups, have a place to go if this development comes forward whilst it's happening. Fifthly, to make sure that the network of different spaces all work together. So it isn't just, they don't sort of work in competition or in isolation, and that those facilities are open to members of the community at affordable rates. And then lastly, to be financially viable, which means to make sure that it can be delivered within reason financially. Helen, I have to go on to the next slide, please. So as we move through the design process, we'll also be obviously looking at other places from which we can draw inspiration. And just to be clear, the images that you might see on these slides aren't places that these aren't the sort of things that they'll look like. These are just simply ideas of other places that kind of can make us think differently. It won't be simply a case of cutting and pasting a design from somewhere else and putting it in at Britannia Village. The designs we develop will very much reflect this place, this community, and the needs that you have. We obviously would love it that the project is actually really high quality and is used by inspiration of other people in the future. Again, you can have some thoughts about these images and some of the other ideas in the breakout areas. So currently, as I said, the entrance area of the hall is small, dark, unwelcoming, and opens straight onto a sort of a long corridor. And we'd like the space to be really generous, open and welcoming, full of light. We know that from running the Royal Wharf Community Dock that having no foyer as you come into the building doesn't really work and means you can't make the most of the space. So we want this new space to be really inclusive and the kind of space that as you walk past it, you actually want to come in, not just to go there for a particular purpose, and a place where all different generations can mix. So, yeah, next slide, please. So again, our anchors, people like the nursery, the after school club, the services around adult learning, etc., are really important to us. Tiny Town has been operating very successfully over the last number of years, and Antina and her team have done a great job at managing the last year in particular. But they're a very successful nursery with a very long waiting list that we'd like to continue to support. And that's even with a building that wasn't that great and very limited outdoor space. And obviously, we'd all want the best for our babies and preschoolers to make sure that they get a good start. All the other activities that happen have got to be supported, so flexibility is the name of the game. And rather than having a series of disconnected spaces, we want things that can connect up much better. We've actually started speaking to our young people, and they've said that we should explore the opportunity for potentially some soundproof studio spaces, some booths in West Silvertown. They'd love to get the skills and learning about an industry which they feel is growing rapidly. The studios would be, if they did happen, they would be very small for 1 or 2 musicians at a time and fully soundproof, because they're actually going to be used by commercial people to also make recordings as well. If you've got ideas for other community-based enterprises, then let us know, because we want to hear. Okay, thank you. Helen will talk in more detail about this, but we started doing a survey, as you probably know, and we found that a lot of people do actually want to move within BV in the next 5 years. They've also told us that a lot of the new developments that come forward don't feel like they're there for them, either because they're too expensive or because they're targeted people on the housing waiting list, or they're not able to get homes in that way. And we could use part of the existing site for 2 things. Firstly, to provide homes which are genuinely designed for that local need, whether that be, for example, more family-sized homes because more families want to move. We'd also use some of those homes to help pay for community space that we're looking to build. All the new homes will be designed to the highest standards of quality, but also sustainability. We'll be aiming at zero carbon, using things like solar panels, air source heat pumps, etc. Thanks, Helen. And lastly, the hall is absolutely not a building on its own, and it's not just a community facility. It's very much the heart of this neighbourhood, and it needs to make sure that it improves in relationship to its surroundings and the streets around it. So in terms of the kind of positive spaces and positive safe places that people can gather. But also we understand there are many neighbours nearby, and we need to understand and respect the impact that any changes might be on them. We also understand that things like parking are a real concern, and we'll be encouraging more cycling and walking by improving those facilities for people who want to use that mode of transport, and we'll only have parking for disabled visitors and perhaps a handful of staff who need to drive. And all the other homes, if we build them, are like to be zero parking. Thank you very much, and I hope that's given you a bit of overview.
Thanks, Dan. That was great. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm just going to continue with this presentation now and start to look at the results from the survey. So have a look at these. So as a lot of you know, a lot of you did this survey, and thank you for giving up your time to do that. We did a community and housing needs survey over January. And this was sent out with 1,000 flyers through doors in Britannia VIllage, through posters in most of the blocks of flats in Britannia VIllage, through West Silvertown social media and MailChimp, West Silvertown Foundations, also through WhatsApp groups and individual WhatsApp messages to people that we knew, and messages to Tiny Town, Vibrant Minds, Britannia VIllage Primary and Oasis Academy Silvertown, asking them to also share this with their regular users and their families. So we really tried to get the word out about this as much as we could. And obviously the way that we did this was quite restricted because of COVID. But we're very happy with the response rate that we had. So as you can see here, we had 196 respondents over the few weeks that the survey was open, and 104 of those were Britannia VIllage residents. And just for a bit of background as well, 39% of those respondents were homeowners, 27% rent privately, and 20% rent from council or housing association, which is roughly representative of the area, not exactly, but fairly roughly there. And 87% of those people had attended a West Silvertown Foundation activity at some point. So some of those people knew us, 87% of them, but also some people responded to the survey that have never come to any of our activities. And it was really good to hear from those as well. So I'm not going to talk through every single question tonight, but I'm going to go through some of the things that I think are the headlines from that survey now. So this first one, there was a question in the survey asking for people's top 3 ideas for improving life in West Silvertown. And this question wasn't specifically directed to West Silvertown Foundation necessarily. It was more just, it literally asked the question, what are your top 3 ideas for improving life in West Silvertown? And it was an open answer question. So there were no options, people could just write whatever they wanted to. And we've gone through here and just found the top 10 ones that were said and grouped those that were very similar. And one thing that really strikes me is that 196 people did the survey, yet the thing that people wrote the most was 30 people, which is quite a small proportion really. And to me, that reflects how diverse our community is in terms of the needs and aspirations of different residents here. So yeah, the gym was the highest choice there, and cafe coming second. Lots of things about there not being amenities in the area, and we'll come back to that later on. An outdoor children's playground was said several times, followed by activities for children and young people, community and cultural events, and you can read the rest of them. I won't read them all out, but as I say, the main thing that struck me here was that 30 out of 196 isn't huge. Not everyone was saying exactly the same thing, although of course that's still a lot of people that are keen for those things. Then we had a separate question that was more directly based around Britannia VIllage Hall itself. So asking people, if we were to redevelop Britannia VIllage Hall, what would be your priorities for new community facilities to be provided? And this graph here shows all respondents, and that is all respondents' answers put together. But the bit on the side, I've purposefully separated out Britannia VIllage residents and other residents, because I think given that there are very different types of developments around here, there are very different sets of needs. And so one thing that jumped straight out at me is the top 3 suggestions in Britannia VIllage residents includes a gym, and that doesn't for the other residents. And most likely that's because most of the other developments that have been built since Britannia VIllage have come with a gym included. And that's not something that happened in Britannia VIllage. So you can see quite a difference there. Exercise classes being very popular across the board. And again, some of the feedback from other development gyms, I know for those of you that live in the other developments, some people have been disappointed by the exercise classes offer there. So that also makes sense. And also cafes, again, coming back to this idea that there are very little amenities. And for other residents that don't live in Britannia VIllage, social groups are a real priority. And that's, yeah, that again seems like a fair enough answer to me, as it's a development where a lot of people are moving in. A lot of these other developments are very new and people might not necessarily have roots and connections here and need spaces for socialising. On the flip side of that, then the bottom 3 suggestions, so graph's still the same, but just looking at the bottom suggestions, the Soundproof recording studio was one of the bottom suggestions, and as is Soundproof meeting room and lone workspace. That's not a massive surprise really, because it's quite a niche thing. Maybe the people that would use it a lot, but some people that's just not something that they're interested in. And as Dan shared earlier, that's you know, we are an organisation that works a lot with young people, and in doing consultation with our young people, that's something that a lot of them are really keen to do. But it might not be that there is enough of a need for us to do it. It might not be that that's something that we'll pursue here. So yeah, that was in the bottom selection there. And then also, again, things like craft groups and hireable meeting rooms. And again, I think this is coming down to, these aren't things that necessarily people will universally want to use. It depends on your interests and your work requirements as well. And then we've got, we had some questions in there about housing as well. It's something that we wanted to know about, as housing could end up being part of this development. So we wanted to initially just ask, do you want to move home within West Silvertown within the next 5 years? And again, I've split this graph up between Britannia VIllage and other residents so that you can see. But 85 out of 196 respondents said that they did want to move locally within the next 5 years. And that the reasoning there was mainly around homes being too small or the current home not being affordable. And also people wanting to live independently and move out of family homes. And as you can see there, it's fairly similar, the percentages between those that needed to move within Britannia Village and outside of Britannia Village. And also, just of those needing to move, I just wanted to include this, as it was quite a variety in terms of the different types of market that people would look to move within. So whether that's on the open market, renting privately from council or housing association, or people considering part by part rent, it was quite a mix, which shows us that there is need in this community for a variety of housing types. And also 26% of people that said they needed to move are currently on the housing waiting list, which for some families in Newham is around 13 years at the moment. So it's a huge waiting list in Newham. And we also wanted to ask whether people would support a small development of housing for local people in West Silvertown. And for us, it was really important to split this into Britannia Village residents and other residents. And we grouped these, by the way, by people gave their postcode as part of the survey. And we from that postcode worked out which development they were in. But as you can see here, what has actually happened is that a higher percentage of people in Britannia Village, which is the blue section, said that they were supportive of it than other residents. So actually, even our immediate neighbours, more of them were saying they were supportive than others. It's not a huge percentage difference, so it's not really statistically significant, but we still found that a very encouraging thing to hear. And for both BV residents and for other residents, roughly double as many people were saying yes, they would support it, to those that said no, they wouldn't. And I just wanted to include a few quotes, because there was a longer answer section at the bottom of that question. And so, firstly, yes, the part of the pie chart shown in blue. Most people that said yes, it was something to do with wanting to stay in the area and not really seeing that as an option. So one person said, my children have little hope of being able to stay living in the area. But for others, it was more about affordability or space and just not wanting to have to move out of the area for that reason. Those that said no, there were a few different types of no's, but the main thing that kept coming through was about local amenities. And there are already too many homes putting strain on local amenities such as schools, doctors, transport and pollution, etc. And that's something that we heard a lot from those people that said no. And something that we do agree, that there is a real strain on amenities here. And that's why we're working with the developers that are coming to make sure that those amenities are fulfilled in the new big developments that are coming around us. There were also some people that were saying no, just purely because those developments are coming around us, and that is thousands of new homes. So therefore, why would we need to fit more on this site? So they were the main reasons people were saying no. And then we've got the maybes, which, as you can see, was roughly a third of respondents. And most of the people saying maybe were just saying it all just depends. I don't know enough to say yes or no whether I would support this, because you've not told me the number of houses, you've not told me the size and the design. For some people, it was about the type of housing, so social housing or private housing. Some would only support private housing, some would only support social housing, which I just think goes to show the diversity in our community. But the majority of those comments were really around, it depends on the size and the design. And I think this quote sums it up. It all depends if the size and design won't clash with the village feel. And there was a lot about not wanting big tall tower blocks, not wanting dense buildings, not wanting things that don't feel in keeping with the rest of Britannia Village. So those are kind of the headlines that we've drawn